Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockers Club. It's time for something cool from MSI. So I actually have three goodies here from MSI. I've already reviewed this power supply. It's part of the MPG series. This is the A750GF 750 watt power supply. I just finished up another one here in the MAG or MAG series. I call it MAG. Core Liquid 360R. RGB liquid cooler, so you can check out that review. And now we are ready for this case. This is the Sekira 500p. Ignite your battlefield. So before we get the box opened up, we'll just go over the general specifications here on the side of the box. So this is actually part of the MPG series, and I'll talk about the difference between the MAG and the MPG here in just a little bit. So something that's important with any case is the motherboard support. So we've got the extended ATX, regular ATX, micro ATX, and the mini ITX. We've got a pretty good range of motherboard form factors that are covered. These are the general dimensions. I/O ports, so we've got two USB 3.2 generation 1, one USB 3.2 generation 2, Type C, two of the regular old standard USB 2.0. There's an audio and a microphone jack. Drive bays, we've got 6 3.5 inch, which are also interchangeable with 2.5 inch drives. So that's quite a few. Usually you don't see cases with that many 3.5 inch drives anymore. We've got 3 2.5 inch drives. It looks like they're dedicated 2.5 inch drives. VGA card support, we can go all the way up to 420 millimeters. That's fairly long. CPU cooler. What we're looking at here is 180 millimeters. This is usually referring to the maximum height on an air cooler, which is important. You know, if your cooler's too tall and your case is too shallow, you can't get the side cover on. Power supply, standard ATX, cooling layout. So let's see, we've got, okay, so this is all fans. So you've got up to 3 120s or 3 140s or 2 200 millimeter fans. In the front, so that's interesting. It looks like it comes with 3 120s that are included. At the top, we can go up to 3 120s or 3 140s or 200. 2 of the 200 millimeter fans in the top. I'm sure that's optional. Yeah, it just says included here is 120 millimeter in the rear, so you can go 120 or 140. So it looks like from the factory it comes with 4 fans. And there it is out of the box. This thing really looks nice. This bag here, it's all nice and custom fit. All the corners are seamed. That's unusual. Nice logo printed on there. MSI, if I can get that to pull up. Yeah, very nice. And MSI knows a thing or two about packing a case. They've got these thick, dense cardboard angles to reinforce all of the corners. And this thick closed cell foam really keeps the case well protected. So, one more thing I want to mention. The case is fairly heavy, so don't hesitate to ask for a little bit of help when you're getting it out of the box. And when you're getting it out of the box, this may or may not be obvious, but these little handles that push in so you can lift the box. When you're trying to get the case out, always slide your hand down there from the top and pop those back through. Otherwise, if they're not pushed back through like that, you will have one heck of a time getting the case out. Remember to do both sides there. Anyway, let's get all of the packing off and see what the actual case looks like. Okay, normally I don't video the packing too much, but when I pop the top off here, you can see they've got the hardware kit sort of incorporated into the top packing, so don't lose that. But something else that's interesting, and usually taking it out of the bag is not very exciting, but look what they do. They actually go to the trouble to Velcro this, and that makes it getting it out so much easier. I mean, this is really nice, the way that they've made the bag come open like that. Okay, so just based on the packaging experience alone, I would say we've already got a real winner, but just looking at this right now, I mean, this really looks nice. I like it. It does sit flat. I mean, absolutely on the bottom. That's the glass from my turntable there. So you could call that pretty much a zero clearance case. Let me get the plastic off of here. I really like the trend now with the glass on the sides, but it is so reflective that you can't really see what's going on. All right, so real quick, I like the way it has these handles incorporated into the door. And let's see how much force. Oh yeah, that's nice. So there are magnets holding that on there. It's got a pretty firm grip. I like that. Sometimes these side panels with the magnets that hold them in place, it just seems like if you just bump the case, the side doors would come open, but that's got a firm grip. And the hinges back here, those appear to be quite robust. And that can be a problem if your hinges are cheap and the back of your case is flimsy. You can tell when you open the doors they just seem to move on you, and these are good and firm. So right off the bat, oh, there we go. There are all your hard drive positions. You can see those right up front. Now let's see, let me go around to the other side. All right. You can see I was testing the Core Liquid 360R there from MSI. That's the radiator we'll be using in this case here in a moment. So we've got plastic on this side too. This looks like this has already been off, so maybe this was a sample case. It looks like it was already on there and then somebody took it off and sort of stuck it back on there real quick. But that's fine. And we have the same type of integrated handle, and it has the same very firm feel to it. And of course the same hinges back here. We open this side, there's the back of the motherboard. And I'll go over this in more detail here in just a little bit. This is just a real quick walk through on the case. You can sort of see through that mesh on top there. The focus of the camera gets sort of tricked by the distance there. There we go. So that's a straight shot clear through the top. Looks like the back part here is solid. So we've got some venting here at the top. Now this is the back of the case. Looks like there's the included 120, and it has holes here for a 140 if you want to put a 140 millimeter fan in the rear. These are all your PCIe expansion slots. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those. And this is a cover. I have to get a screwdriver. I think if this supports a vertical GPU, let me open this panel on this side. And yeah, it does have a blank out plate there, so it does look like this supports a vertical graphics card. Oh yeah, see the studs there? That usually is for a PCIe extension cable mount. So looking at the front here, I'll pop this front panel off and see. It looks like it's pretty well ventilated, but we'll see. Sometimes those holes on these can be small, but sometimes the distance between them is such that it's a little on the restrictive side, but we'll see a little later here. And here's your opening for the power supply. It looks like, there we go. So we've got a filter panel. It's a pretty short one. Is there another one? Looks like there might be another one up front. So looks like you pop one out from the back, one out from the front. And I'm going to move this so it's a little more stable on my table, and we'll start sort of taking it apart. Let me look at the I/O at the top here real quick. So there's the power button. Looks like your activity LED or power LED. There's your, looks like a hard drive activity light, headphone, microphone, and then your various USB ports, followed by the latest and greatest in the USB world, which is, let me zoom in there, Type C. We're starting to see more and more of those appear on cases. And usually a front panel like this, I'm used to these swinging open. I don't think this one does. And of course there would be like a filter panel and your fans behind that. Sometimes there's a space or two for an optical drive. Again, we don't have that on this case, but I don't think this opens. And I'm back to looking inside. One thing I'll point out, this has a very large power supply shroud, covers your power supply. And there's sort of a good and bad side to that. It just depends on what your goal is. If you have a really nice power supply and you want to show it off, well, you're sort of limited because it's covered. Some cases you can remove these, or they're made in two sections. This one is not removable. It is riveted in position, so it is what it is here. But you are afforded the ability with these power supply shrouds to stash all your cables. You've got some room there to hide your cables. Looks like there's a fair amount of space here in the back, again, for cable management. And it looks like, I'll have to verify, it looks like these cages here, these hard drive cages, are removable. So if you needed a little more room to stash some more cables, especially if you don't have a modular power supply, you could certainly do that. All right, as far as documentation that comes with the case, some sort of an advertisement here, some sort of something contest you can enter. This here is like a little bill of material sort of thing, or a list of all of your fasteners, what they are, quantity, what they do. That's good. Here's your I/O panel on the top of the case, shows you what each item is. This is for your graphics card, vertical graphics card. Hard drive trays. Looks like top cover, top fan bracket. Looks like something's removable. Specifications. Quick start guide here is a little lean. I mean, it does have all the basic information. Put your motherboard in, put your I/O panel on the back of the motherboard if it has one. Connections for your case control, power supply, hard drive trays, graphics card, taking the little block off plates out of the back, solid state drive. So these are pretty sparse. For me, it doesn't bother me because I've built so many of these systems over the years. There's nothing in here that's going to surprise me. For someone who's just building their system for the first time, yeah, some details there might be a little on the light side. But anyway, moving right along. I got the front of the case popped off so you can see the three included 120 millimeter fans, and there are provisions here for 140 millimeter fans if you want to swap them out. And at the bottom is the front dust cover, or I guess the front bottom dust cover. There's actually one at the back that I already looked at. It just pops right in there. And the other thing that I want to show is the front of the case here. This front panel, this is actually pretty heavy. This is brushed aluminum. It is not plastic, although the frame here is plastic. And you can see it's almost like a little supporting chassis there. But that is plastic, but the front is not. And of course there are these mesh side grills to let air in. You can see light through those. And the depth here, what I need to do is verify the offset to see if I can get a radiator on the front in like a push-pull configuration. A lot of people ask that. And depending upon how the front of the case is set up, sometimes you can only get fans, sometimes you can get a radiator and one set of fans, and sometimes there's enough room for a radiator and two sets of fans for a push-pull configuration. And when I popped this cover off, I had to sort of squeeze these little tabs together right here, pinch them together, and they fit in those little holes right there and right there. And you can see there are several of those sticking out. And on a brand new case, sometimes they're pretty stiff and they don't want to pop out very easily. So what I had to do was open the sides, and inside the case where those little plastic tabs stick through, I had to sort of squeeze them together and push out on this side. Had to open the other cover and do the same on this side, and that got the very front of the cover to sort of push away a little bit. Then I had to get my fingers in there and sort of give it a quick pull, and then the rest of it came off. So sometimes these things can be pretty stiff on a brand new case, and you're almost afraid that you're going to break it. And I think if I look inside here, we should have, yeah, there are the little tabs right in here in the top also. So I'll squeeze those together and this whole top section should come off. And that's what I'll do. I squeezed this side together already and popped it up a little bit. And let me get this side, if I can find them. They're not, I don't feel them on this side. Well, they're kind of up and in there. Let's see if I can just sort of, oh, there we go. That was easy. Yeah, that just came right off. Okay, well that wasn't too bad at all. And this is the same thing. This is a brushed aluminum finish. Very nice. And it has the same mesh sides there for airflow. Plastic frame. And that's about it on the top. Other than getting a camera view of the top, so you can see you have all of your mounting holes there for your different fans. And it looks like, I'll have to confirm the layout here, it looks like you've got room for 120s, 140s, and you might be able to offset things. Let's see, I'll have to figure that out here in a moment. There's the top I/O panel. And here's a little better look at the top of the case. So what they've got here, they've got these outer slots here and here, which are set up for a 140 millimeter fan, which is what this one is. And we've got space here. If you look at the slots, you've got two close together and then these three. So it looks like we can put the 120 like that, or you can shift it over to this position. So I guess this is really in the center line of the case, and it looks like you can offset if your radiator, if you put like a top mount radiator in here, and if it interferes with your motherboard, because sometimes there's not a lot of clearance. And again, I'll confirm that when I start getting things together, but that's what it looks like. They give you an option to shift at least the 120 millimeter fans or radiator toward this side of the case. And they give you some nice generous openings here to get your fan cables through. Plenty of room there to fish. If you want to put RGB fans up there for whatever reason, you've got plenty of room to push everything down and through there. Just like that. Which is nice because sometimes the manufacturers don't leave you enough room to get your cables through. And with the side open here, you can see, so the top of your motherboard, these are your top studs. So there's quite a bit of room here between the top edge of where your motherboard would be and the top of the case. So there's plenty of room there for one set of fans, and it looks like the thickness of a radiator. So you could go with a set of fans, a radiator, and if you wanted to put 3 more fans on top, there should be plenty of room within the top of the case here. The top cover, you can see how deep that is. So we will check that out. Usually when I do the builds, I try to show as many configurations with the radiator, you know, in the top, in the front, so you get an idea of the capabilities of the case. And I'll certainly do that with this one. And I'm sort of bouncing around here, but I've got the back of the case open now, and I took this screw out and I took this screw out right there, which frees up this hard drive cage. So if we come around to the front, you can see these slots here. That's so you can actually add another one of these to the top of this. There are the mounting holes, and then another one on top of that if you wanted to. So that tells me these are probably available as an accessory through MSI, so I need to verify that. So with those screws out, this should just pull right out, and it does. Just like that. So you can see those 2 little rails right there go into those slots. And if you don't need this, well, then you can just take it out. So I showed now how you can get the top cage out, but actually I took a screw out here and a screw out over here. And if we sort of release these trays, this whole drive cage can come out from the back here. If for some reason you don't want one in that location. And you can see, let me find somewhere to put this, off to the side. So let me get the camera down here. So you can see that opens that whole space up. So if we swing around to the other side here, get the door open there, you can see that opens that all up. Now what's interesting is usually cases, or I shouldn't say usually, often with cases that have this integrated power supply shroud, there will be a notch right here or a plate that can be removed so that you can put a radiator back here on this face or fans. And we don't have that in this particular case. However, it does look like, and like I said, I need to verify, that I can get a radiator and a set of fans with the cover on there. But what you have to watch out for is that if that front cover is right up against these fans, now you start to starve the fans for air. So when I get to the radiator installation, we'll have to investigate that in more detail. Now the other thing I forgot to show when we were looking at the front. So if you recall, these holes here and here are for 140 millimeter fans, but you can get 200 millimeter fans in the front and on the top. There are mounting holes up there too. So there's one set right here and here, and you can see sort of the arc that shows the outline or the perimeter of a 200 millimeter fan. So we've got another mounting provision there, one here, and then we've got 2 and 2 down here for another 200 millimeter fan. So you can get 2 of those in the front. And again on top, I didn't show this earlier, totally forgot about it, but we have mounting provisions up here for a 200 millimeter fan and another 200 millimeter fan if you want to put a fan that large in your case. Okay, let's get this open one more time. So looking at the inside here, they give you some nice Velcro straps for your cable management and plenty of little tie-off points. Here, let's see, there's one here, one here, one here. You can use other straps or tie wraps to keep your cables in order. Again, we've got the 2 solid state drive trays right there for your 2.5 inch drives. The other thing here, we've got some I/O cables here. So there's USB, HD audio. These are usually your hard drive activity light, power LED, all that good stuff. Here's your USB 3.0 big connector there, and then we've got our other USB for the latest USB-C connection. And we've got several grommets. They're sort of covered by the cables, but your pass-through grommets for power cables, SATA cables. But we do have some very large openings right next to that. So you got grommets if you want to pass through there, or you can go right through here. At the top, again, these 2 grommets, nice because you will have a 4-pin or an 8-pin power cable that has to go for your CPU power on the top of your motherboard. And some cases leave just a tiny little hole up here and you just can barely get the cables through, but here you should have no problem at all. As far as clearance goes, directly behind the motherboard tray, we've got about 25 millimeters, which is about 1 inch. Down at the bottom here, it sort of kicks in a little bit to the hard drive cages, and here we've got closer to 35 millimeters of clearance down here. So you should have just tons of room to stash any of your cables, keep them out of view for a nice, clean, organized look to the back of your case here, and keep all those cables out of view. Now what I need to do is flip her back around to the front, and one last look at the inside here before I start the system build. So we've got some nice grommets here at the bottom. This is usually where your USB pass-through connectors will come through. That's usually along the bottom of the motherboard. Of course, we've got these 3 nice grommets and these other 3 openings. as well as the two nice grommets here at the top. So next, I will go ahead and get the motherboard in there, and then we'll sort of figure out the front mounting of the radiator and the top mounting and get everything sort of configured. And actually, before I start putting the system together, I better flip it. Up here, I need to be really careful that I don't open these doors because they will fly open under gravity and probably not end well, but you wouldn't normally have your case in this orientation. So anyway, what I wanted to show here are the two filters on the bottom. Again, this one pulls out from the front, this one pulls out from the back. And you've got these 4 rubber pads for the feet, keep the case from sliding around on the floor, also keep it from scratching the floor. But you'll notice, you can see here, we've got these channels cut, and that allows air to flow in from the outside at the bottom of the case. There you can see the light through them. And it can be pulled in from the bottom. So you're not, even though this thing pretty much sits on the floor, it is open from the back. It can pull air in from there or along the bottom here through the mesh on the sides. And the depth here is approximately 42 millimeters. So there's quite a bit of clearance there, even though, like I said, this sits directly on the floor. Okay, I know I keep saying I'm going to do the system build and I keep dragging it out, but what I wanted to show here, I went ahead and took the bottom 2 hard drive cages out, and I can slide this one on there, it locks in. I'm not going to put the fasteners in, but this just shows you what it looks like if you stacked them up 3 high. So I still need to find out if this is available as an accessory or not. It looks like it would be, but we'll see what the manufacturer says. And all of the hard drive cages are back in their original location. I'll pull one of these little plastic trays out. You can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4 back there holes that you can actually put solid state drives in these positions if you like. So it is getting harder to find cases that have more than a couple of spaces for a 3.5-inch drive, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Okay, I keep saying it, and now I'm actually going to get the motherboard installed. Here's a quick update. So I did contact the manufacturer here about these hard drive cages if you did want to purchase any more, and they are not currently available, but they could be in the future. So if you're interested, you might just drop MSI a message and let them know that you would be interested in these, and who knows, they might make them available as an accessory in the future. And one more thing I wanted to point out about the different series here. So what you have are the MAG, the MPG, and the MEG. And I'm just using the motherboards here as an example. But they're basically 3 tiers, or 3 different price points, 3 different performance levels, 3 different feature sets, whatever you want to call it. So the MAG is at the bottom, so you could call this the good. The MPG is in the middle. That's a little better, more features, more functionality. And the MEG is the top of the line. So now I'll start transferring my system components over to the case. And the first thing I'll probably put in is the MSI MPGA 750GF power supply. But before I do that, I probably should have shown this earlier. When you are building your system to keep from opening and closing the doors, they get in the way. These actually lift off if you're very careful. They lift right off the hinges there. And like I said, just be careful and put them somewhere where they're not going to get knocked over and damaged. The glass is pretty robust, but you can still have an accident. So again, lift these off the hinges very carefully. Now when you do your system build, you're not constantly opening and closing the doors. All right, so ready for the power supply. And now I'll get the power supply installed. So I've already reviewed this. You can check out the link I'll post in the description. Good power supply, really like it. It is fully modular. So one thing to keep in mind with a case like this, where your power supply goes in here at the bottom. Now I can remove this hard drive tray as I showed earlier, But if you want to leave that in there, you have sort of a limited amount of space in here to get in there and plug cables in. So where I'm going with that is figure out on the back which cables you need, get them plugged in, so when you put the power supply in, the cables are already there, because it's very difficult, even if you have small hands, to get in there and get things plugged in. So if you do that ahead of time, it'll save you a lot of headaches. So what I'll do is look at the system build. I already know everything that's going to be connected, but I'll go through here and I'll only connect the cables that I need for this particular system build. Now I need to get a couple of fasteners out of the hardware kit to connect the or attach the power supply to the case, and I realized I hadn't gone through the hardware kit yet, so let's take a look and see what all is in here. So there's a plate of some sort, all the little fasteners. Okay, so this piece here looks like yeah, that's what it is. This is the vertical GPU brackets. This goes in the back of the case, and I'll show that later. So this is so you can mount your GPU vertically. This is a hard drive block off plate, and I think I'll have to look at this in a little more detail, but I think when you take these hard drive trays out, like I showed earlier, it leaves that hole in the front of the case. You can put this in there to sort of block it off, make it look a little nicer. Now it only comes with one, so I guess you could take one of these trays out and stack it on top of the other one and block off that one. Maybe. That's what it sounds like to me. Fasteners. Usually there's a standard array of screws for motherboard mounting, some cable ties, some regular 632 screws. So these are like for attaching the power supply. We've got several of these are nice thumb screws here. Some standoffs for motherboard mounting if you've got different configurations, and these are the motherboard screws right here. So I can get a couple of screws here out for the power supply mounting. Now you're supposed to use 4, but I would just pop 2 in there because as many reviews as I do, these power supplies don't stay in the case usually for more than a couple of days. Now you can put your power supply in with the fan up or the fan down, because we've got a mesh area here to draw fresh air in from the bottom of the case. And some cases have a vented section. Now this one isn't, and I don't think it would be a problem if you put the fan facing up, but you have to be careful, because when you're building your system, of course, do not turn your power supply on until you are completely ready. But it's real easy to drop a fastener when your fan is mounted up, and it can go into the power supply. If that happens, of course, you want to make sure it's never plugged in until you're completely ready. But if you do drop something in there, make sure you retrieve it immediately. Get the power supply out of there and shake it and get whatever fell in there out. Because if you don't, in all the excitement of your system build, it's easy to forget, and you know, hey, I'll come back and get that later, and you don't, and then you plug it in, and bad things can happen if you have a stray fastener in your power supply. So for this build, I think I'll just go ahead and put this in with the fan facing down. And you can see here with this hard drive cage in, now there's some nice rubber feet there that the power supply sits on to help dampen any vibration, and they support the power supply. But you can see right now with this hard drive cage in, there's pretty much no way I could get in there to add any more of these cables to the back of the power supply. Now if I take this power supply out, that's a little different story. I can probably get my hand in there, but not all cases have that ability. So again, the reminder there is just to make sure you get your power supply configured ahead of time. Now I'll just go ahead, pop a couple screws in there, and this will be ready, and I can start getting the motherboard installed. Okay, so I got everything together, no issues, no problems at all with this system build. The radiator fits nicely in the top there. Since the fans are RGB, you certainly want to try and show those off, so you don't want to sandwich them, on top of the radiator, or, flip-flop these positions. So they're pushing air, or I should say, they're pushing air through the radiator. So they're pulling it in from the case, and they're blowing it out the top. You could technically put another set of fans up here for a push-pull configuration. Although I have to say, honestly, all the systems I've tested with a push-pull, the benefit of the extra fans wasn't, is there a benefit? Yeah, but it wasn't a whole lot given the extra noise and trying to find, enough fan headers to plug everything in. So while there was a time where I was sort of more of a fan of push-pull, now I'm not so much. Anyway, the other thing is when you put the top cover on, you really need some airspace up here, so the fans, when they push the air up through the top, that air has a place to sort of build up and then push out through the side panels, which I'll show here when I get the top back on. So you can see I'll just set this like that for the moment. So you can see there's air above, there's space above for fans, but the air, I think this thing will run better if we leave it like that, with a place for the air to sort of accumulate and then blow out. And this should just push. Yep. Let's see, did I get both sides? Yeah, I got both sides there. And a little later here, I'll get the radiator mounted in the front, and we'll see how that works out. And the other thing I'll show is putting the graphics card in the vertical position. Now it comes with a bracket. The other part of that equation, though, is you have to have a special PCI extension cable, which I do happen to have one of those. So I'll get that set up and we can see what that looks like. So I just said I was going to try and get the radiator in the front, and guess what? You really can't get the radiator in the front, at least not a 360. So I've got a 280 right there. I'm going to try that, because I think if I take this hard drive cage out, that'll free up enough space here. And the other observation I made, I just cranked up the load on the graphics card there, so it's purposely dumping a lot of heat in the case. But I noticed when the front was on, and again it sits pretty close to the front of the fans, I noticed it seemed like there wasn't much air coming through here with the fans cranked up. But as soon as I took that front cover off and took away the restriction, there's a noticeable amount of air coming through here. So I'm going to look into that a little more closely, because keeping a case cool is, of course, obviously, how much air you can move through it. So how much air you can pull in generally through the front, and you push out through the top and the back. So I'm going to experiment a little here, but really it depends on your setup. So if you have a graphics card like this, which dumps most of the heat that it generates right into the case, and of course with the radiator in the top, now I'm taking that warm air coming from the graphics card and I'm trying to use that warm air to cool my radiator. That's not the most efficient or effective way to do it. So what I'm going to do is sort of experiment a little bit here. What I'm thinking is, one thing I'll do, if I take these two fans, I can't take the third one and move it because this section here is not removable, so there's no way to put the fan on the inside. So what I'll do is take these two fans and put them on the inside of the case. That'll free up this space right here, which should allow more air to move through the case, at least through these two fans. And I'll explain that in a little more detail here when I get that front cover back on. So the other option is, to be more efficient if you're using a graphics card like this, is to use a front mounted radiator, but you'll want to use a 240, and I think this 280 here will fit. I'm going to try that here in a moment. If that's the case, then you can have a front mounted radiator that'll pull cool air in from the front, help to keep your CPU cool. Then your graphics card can dump heat into the case, and it's not that big of a deal because you can put 3 fans in the top, and that'll pull the heat from the case and help push it right out of the top. So that would be a more ideal situation. Or if you have one of these blower style graphics cards like this, you can see all of the heat that generates, or that is generated from this card, is being pushed out through this big blower fan here, and it gets pushed right out of the case, out of the back. And that's a very efficient way of handling heat from a graphics card, but not all graphics cards are like that. So the first thing I'll do, I think I'll see if these fans, or how easy it is to move these on the inside of the case, and then sort of see what kind of airflow difference I've got. And actually, before I move those fans, I'll do a test here with everything in sort of a stock setup. So I've got the radiator, 360 millimeter radiator at the top. Got the fans cranked up to the maximum RPMs, and I left the front fans in the original configuration. Put the front cover back on, so I've got the CPU and the GPU both stressed. And the CPU right now is sitting at about 85 degrees Celsius, 87, sort of bouncing around there a little bit. And hey, we got a blue screen, all right. And I have the fans cranked up to the maximum RPM. The overclock is running at 4.9 gigahertz using AIDA64 for the stress test. And I'm seeing an average of about 84.5 degrees Celsius on the CPU. And that is with the fans in the front here in their stock location. I'm not stressing the GPU at this time. I'm just looking at the heat generated by the CPU and how well it can be removed. So what I'll do now is I'm going to remove the front of the case and see what that does to the average temperature with regard to the average temperature, if that additional airflow has any effect. And I haven't touched anything as far as system controls. All I did was pull the front cover off, so we'll watch it for a little bit and see what that does to the average CPU temperature. My guess is with a little more airflow going into the case without that cover restricting any airflow, will probably drop a little bit. All right, so it looks like after that blue screen I went in and tweaked my overclock a little, and it seems to be pretty stable. So right now we're running 80.9, 81 degrees on average with the front cover off. Nothing else changed. So it definitely knocked down not quite 4 degrees, 4.5 degrees. And what I'll do next is take these two front fans and I'll put them on the other side of this face right here, which will open this area up for hopefully a little better airflow, a little less restriction, since we won't have the cover directly in front of the fans. Now the bottom fan I can't do anything with because of the way the bottom section is here for these two hard drives. I can't remove that, so this fan will just have to stay where it is. So let's see what effect it has when I move these fans inside and then put the cover back on. All right, I have the two fans now moved to the inside of the case. The goal being, again, to see if moving them away from the inside of this front cover has any effect on the airflow, ultimately resulting in better temperature. So I'm running about 80.7 there on average. I actually kept everything running while I moved the fans, so probably shouldn't do that at home. But next, I'll put the cover back on and we'll look at the temperatures and see what effect that has. All right, we've been running a little while here and I'm about 83 average with the fans. These two fans moved to the inside. So it appears that there is a little bit of an advantage, a couple of degrees, with the fans moved. Now, of course, the best situation for the least restriction is without the front cover, but nobody's going to run their case without the front cover. And here is the good old thermal camera. We'll take a quick look. On the side here, there's a lot of reflection on the glass, but if we look at the top of the case, you can see that's where the heat is being pushed out through the vents there along the top edges, or the top sides. And there is the top of the case. And then we'll look around here at the back. I have the GPU stressed also in addition to the CPU. So you can certainly see where the graphics card is located. And then down here at the bottom you can see the power supply. And then we'll look along the front. Temperature is fairly consistent, although you can see there's a difference between the bottom and the top, but that makes sense because the heat is being pushed out of the top of the case, so that's where you would expect to see the warmest temperatures. And now I have the side of the case opened up so we can look at all of the internal components right there on the motherboard next to the pump, or next to the cold plate I should say, is the VRM, and that's where the hottest point is going to be. And then we look at the top, you can see the radiator and the fans. Definitely see where the coolant lines come in. And there's the side of the radiator tank. And there's the front of the case looking at the inside. No, I have the fans still mounted on the inside. As you can see, there's a little bit of the warm air that's being recirculated through some of the holes in the chassis, but that's pretty normal. But that's what the inside looks like. Okay, one thing I forgot to show is the RGB effects on the fans there. I didn't have that plugged in, or it got unplugged somehow, but anyway, that's what the cooler looks like with the RGB enabled. So the test I'm doing now is I have the GPU stressed. It's running about 60 to 61 degrees Celsius. I've got the fans cranked up. There's a fan there and one underneath that you can't really see. So I'm running it in this orientation, and now, or next I should say, is I'll put the vertical GPU bracket in there, mount this thing vertically, and we'll see if that has any effect on temperature for this particular card. So to get the vertical bracket in there, the first thing you do is take that fastener out, and then this piece comes off. I already started to pop out. There's a little plastic block off plate there that will ultimately be removed before you put this plate back on. Just a little stiff getting it out of there since it's never been removed before. But anyway, this piece here comes out. Alright. It put up a little bit of a fight, but that blank plate is removed from here, or block off plate, whatever you want to call it. And then leave that there for now. Then you come around this side, open it up, and this is your vertical bracket. And it goes in with the tab down like that. And let's see, I've got to get it in the right orientation. I think it goes like that. Let's see. Yep, that's it. So it goes in there with that bottom tab into that slot back there, and then it pushes forward. And then you come in from the back with a couple fasteners to secure it. So I need to go get another one of these. Actually, they give you a bag of these I guess thumb screws also. So I'll use a couple of the old-fashioned and a couple of these new ones that come with it. So that way you got two at the bottom, two at the top to secure the bracket. And after those are secure, if I know how to use a screwdriver here, there we go. Okay, so when you're relocating your graphics card from the horizontal to the vertical position, you have to have one of these. This is a PCIe expansion cable or relocation cable. This is made by Fractal Design. There are many people who make these, but I've got this one from Fractal Design. That's a Flex VRC25. And these things, you know, check out Amazon. They range anywhere from $25 to $45 usually. So anyway, this end plugs into your PCIe slot where your card plugs now. And then this end here, and it has a couple of holes to rigidly mount it to the floor of the case, if your case has those provisions. We've got some studs down here. I'll have to see if the spacing, let's see if that's right or not. It actually Looks pretty close, but we'll see here in a little bit how well those will work. It would be nice if they were spaced properly, but if they're not, it's not a huge problem. So I'll unplug the power cables, even though I don't really have to. It'll just be a little easier to move the card around. So we'll take the card out for now, but I have to take the fastener off the back here, or loosen it, so that I can get the graphics card out. Now this card here is not terribly heavy, but some cards can be very heavy and they start to droop if they're not supported properly, but I don't really have that problem with this particular card, so we'll get it out of here very carefully. Helps if you disconnect your DisplayPort cable first. And let's see. Okay, words of wisdom. Take your graphics card out before you put that vertical bracket in there, because when it's in there, you can't get your card out. I learned that the hard way. So now I can go ahead and put this bracket back in. So anybody who is going to put their card in a vertical orientation, it's good to know that ahead of time. All right, so now we can get back to getting this all installed. You know, usually when I'm recording these little video clips and stitching them all together, when I run into a situation like that where I start to put something together and then realize I have got a couple steps out of order, I used to edit that out, but actually I'm starting to leave those little things in just to show that, you know what, no matter how many years you've been doing this stuff, you can still run into little problems like that, and it's just normal. Okay, so this is the business end here, and they give you two different locations, and I need to see which one is going to make the most sense. So the first thing is to plug this in to my number one slot here, top slot, and I think this will fit. Maybe, maybe not. I can get at least one screw in. It looks like the pitch is off just enough that I can only use one of these screws, one of these fasteners. So with that in mind, I will just connect one side here. I'll go with the far side for now and kind of see where that puts me. And again, I'm assuming this is the right distance. I should actually sort of do a dry test fit first here in a moment. If I can get this screw to start. There we go. Oh, that's actually a fine pitch, and I'm trying to put a coarse threaded screw in there. So like I said, okay, we'll try that again with a fine thread screw. And hopefully the card here. Oh, much better. Yep, that went right in. Okay. And you know, this is not off by much. So let's see how well everything lines up. So the card is now attached to the PCIe adapter, and it looks like the holes on this end line up. So even though I can't get that front screw in, it looks like I'll be okay with the back one back here. Because really I'm securing the card up here at the front, and that's pretty good. That's not going to go anywhere. Now I get the power cables hooked back up. And I just keep learning new things. So when I went to put this piece back on, see, it fits nicely. Now, while I had to take the fasteners out, I was using these larger fasteners here. Well, they're so big that when you go to put this on, they were interfering. They wouldn't fit. So I had to pull those out. I've got one more to put in, but you have to put in more conventional, actually two more I got to put in, more conventional screws rather than these. So good information to know when you're setting this all up. So like I said, no matter how many times you put these things together, it seems you always run into that one situation where you put things in upside down, backwards, you forget to connect something, and it's usually not a big deal, it just slows you down. All right, now in this case, let's see, now I still can't put one of those fasteners. Maybe I can put one in here. Let's see. Actually, I gotta get this lined up properly. And I don't know that you necessarily need this back piece, but it does make the back of the case look a little nicer. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go with just a regular screw back here. This is just not playing nicely. And there's what that back trim piece looks like when it's attached. And again, I just had to use a regular fastener in all these positions here. Now, if you had a graphics card with a lot of RGB effects going on, it would look really nice in a vertical orientation. And there's a fair amount of space here. In fact, let me see how far that is, because people always ask how much clearance is there. So roughly from the graphics card to about where the glass would be, you've got about 28 millimeters approximately from this face here to the inside of the glass, which I actually took the door off. It kept getting in the way while I was getting this bracket in there. So now let me get the door back on, and then we'll get this thing fired back up, and we'll see what the temperatures look like with the graphics card in the vertical orientation. I don't know if we'll really see any difference. There we go. Got to be very careful when you get that back on the hinges. Okay, I think we're ready to hit the power. There we go. Open that up so you can see graphics card. And again, like I said, even though I'm not really mounting it exactly right, since I'm only using one of the fasteners back there, it's still in there pretty firmly, and I'm not worried about anything happening to it. The fan on the back side that you can't see was not running because this cable was actually sitting back here up against it, so always check your cables for interference. So anyway, one thing I noticed, if you recall, I was getting temperatures around 60 to 61 in the horizontal position, and with the door closed it was getting 63 to 64 in the vertical position, and I had the door open for a minute earlier and I noticed the temperature dropped down to around 59 or 60, and when I close the door it goes back up to 63, 64 if you let it sit for a little bit. So you can see we're already climbing back up. So here's where I had the door open. You can see we got down to 59 and 60. Here's where I had the door closed. It was 64. You can almost see exactly where I opened it and right where I closed it, and we're creeping back up. So that just shows you how important airflow is, at least for this particular graphics card. Now, even though we've got about 28 millimeters of clearance, obviously it likes as much fresh air as possible. Of course, different graphics cards with different fan configurations will, of course, be affected differently by a vertical mount. Alright, so that's it for the GPU stuff. I went ahead and put the fans back in the front into the original configuration. And what I want to show, sort of the last thing here, is this is a 280 millimeter radiator from Cougar Gaming. And I just want to show that it fits just fine in here. You can definitely get a 280 millimeter radiator in there. And from a CPU cooling standpoint, that's probably a better option, is to put a radiator like this in the front. That way you're pulling fresh air in directly from the front of the case. You'll get the most efficiency in cooling your CPU. Because anytime you have a radiator in the top, regardless of the case, typically any heat that is built up in the case from the motherboard, from your graphics card, all of that heat is what's going to be used to go right through your radiator, and you're not getting the benefit of pulling in your cooler ambient air from outside the case. So sometimes it's a trade-off. You may not have the option of putting a radiator in the front, but this just shows that you can get a 280 in there. Alright, so I decided to go back and install a 280 millimeter radiator in the front here. Now, I know I had a Cougar radiator in there before. I misplaced some of the hardware, so I just grabbed my Cooler Master Liquid ML280 mirror, and I took the fans off of the Core Liquid 360R MSI cooler, and I just put the fans in the top. So it's sort of the situation I was talking about earlier, with a front-mounted radiator bringing cool air in from the front, and then warm air that's in the case will be pushed out the top and out the rear, ideally. And we're holding at about 76, about 76 degrees. So we knocked a few degrees off. Of course, this isn't really apples to apples, because we couldn't get the 360 in the front to sort of see how it performed. But this just sort of shows you one option for a front-mounted radiator. Alright, so with the radiator, I had it in the front. I decided to go ahead and just put it in the top. So this is the 280 millimeter radiator in the top. I put the factory fans back in, but I did go ahead and put them on the inside of the case, since that did offer a little better airflow. So the system is under a load, and I'm running right at about 78 degrees. So we're a couple degrees higher than when the radiator was in the front. And now I'm going to go ahead and stress the graphics card, and let's see how quickly the temperature inside there starts to go up. And that should be reflected in the CPU temperature climbing. Alright, with the graphics card stressed now, along with the CPU, I'm averaging about 87 degrees, so that's not really too much different than when the 360 millimeter radiator was in the top. And keep in mind, if you want to stick with the MSI theme with all of your components, MSI does make several 240 and 280 millimeter liquid coolers. And like I said, I think that would be a more bang for the buck option as far as keeping your CPU cool. So let me get the front cover back on here. Right now, this case is $149 at Amazon, and for a case that has the motherboard coverage, the optional vertical GPU mount, all this extra space for 3.5-inch drives. Of course, I took the one drive bay out of there when I was fooling with the fans. The nice full glass sides, that open very conveniently. The positive way this thing closes and is held shut with the magnets. Brushed aluminum top and front. I think it's a decent price. The fit and finish of everything, though, is pretty good. I don't see anything on here where there are gaps or fitment issues. Everything is pretty much line to line. Everything is straight. Nothing is bowed or potato chipped, or I don't see any manufacturing defects or anything that's even remotely questionable. So with regard to airflow, it's not horrible, but I proved that I could make a small improvement simply by taking these two fans and moving them to the inside of the case. That alone made a small improvement. Now I like the mesh here, but I think the fine pitch is sort of working against you. It's a little restrictive, even though it looks really nice. I think they need larger holes with a wider spacing to get more air through there. Because by moving those fans to the inside, that sort of freed up some space. And anytime you can reduce restriction, anytime you can keep the air from making abrupt changes in direction, and it really has to make a quick 90-degree turn when it comes through here in order to get pushed into the case. It's always best when you can keep those restrictions to a minimum. And with the fine pitch here, you know, if you get any kind of dust buildup, you're going to offer even more restriction on there. So you have to make sure you keep these panels clean. So if I were building with this case, I think ideally to get the most out of your CPU cooling would be to use a 280 or a 240 millimeter radiator up front. Put your 120s in the top or some 140s in the top to really help pull that heat from the case and push it out through the top. I think that would be the best configuration. Your graphics cards, you know, they're sort of limited there. They can only pull air from inside the case. Also keep in mind that most people don't have their GPU and their CPU cranked up to the max, dumping huge amounts of heat into their case, at least not all the time. But as I say with anything, coolers, cases, your mileage will vary depending upon your system build and the components you use and the temperature of your room. So with all of those things considered, the fit and finish, the feature set, I would give this the Overclockers Club Gold Award. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.